capture all of Renate's insights at the same time. Let me just double check that worked. I'd like to invite today Renate Kohlmann. Renate has been a Grow Remote since the start and has a unique insight because she works in the community side, but she also had transitioned Wayfair from in-office to remote, which again is quite a unique perspective in terms of not just managing a remote team, but taking them from in-office and building out that remote piece. And particularly in Wayfair, there are lots of entry-level customer support type roles, so that'll be really interesting. I know this isn't Renate's first time doing something like this. A brief introduction to Grow Remote. We're a social enterprise that makes remote work local, so we operate in about 120 local communities. We're local chapter leads, foster communities of remote workers locally, and we try to bring together everything around remote work and put it into one place. So after this workshop, I will send an email around with all the resources that we have to hand. The format for this one, and we're still testing and working on this, is 30 minutes hearing from the speaker, Renate this time, 10 minutes Q&A, and then maybe 20 minutes just hopping in a Zoom room where, not unlike the webinar function where it's us and then you, in a Zoom room, we're all together, kind of like the Brady Bunch, and we can just chat amongst ourselves and speak about how we're finding remote work, how the process is working for us. So we're a totally volunteer organisation, but we try never to take that for granted. So Renate, can I just thank you again for the time that you're donating to the community? We really, really massively appreciate it. And just a last maybe housekeeping piece is that the Q&A box is down the bottom of your screen there. And if you want to type your questions in there as we go along, that's how we'll pick up the questions that we'll take during the Q&A section. So I'll pass it over to you, Renate. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you, Tracy, and thanks for the invitation to talk here this evening. And for everybody who's on, thank you for coming along. And for those of you who are going to be listening to this at a later date, hopefully you'll be able to get some benefit from it as well. So this evening I'm coming to you from Ballinasloe. So I'm living in East County Galway. Originally I'm from Dublin, but this is where I first started remote working. Back in 2004, when I was working for Dell computers, and the way that came about was really having a manager who understood and had the foresight to see that this would work. And I was managing a remote team across EMEA at the time, which involved hopping on planes quite a bit as well and going to the other sites across Ireland and Europe. But it was really only for his trust and his foresight. And I learned a lot about that. That was probably my first foray into the world of remote. And from the very, very start is how important the trust was and the communication. I think also being able to forge a role for yourself at that time was important because we didn't see any of those roles being advertised. So that was about asking the questions. I'm the chapter lead for Grow Remote for Ballinasloe, and we have our chapter up on the Change X tool, which is available from the Grow Remote. You can see it on the Grow Remote website. As Tracy said, what we're doing with Grow Remote is we're all about connecting communities with companies and individuals. So we're there to try and help to bridge that gap. And whatever supports those different individuals will need and those different groups, we're here to try and help with that. But look, today I'm here to talk about moving to remote. And in the world that we are at the moment, there are many people who are looking to work remotely for the very first time. So what we're going to try and do is demystify it a little bit and give you some insights into a couple of tips and things along the way, and how you can see that if you've had a job before that hasn't been remote, that going remote maybe isn't too that far away. Yes, there's some work that's going to have to be done. It's probably not a case that you'll walk into it straight away, but the point is that there's a path to get there. And I just kind of want to share some of that with you today. As Tracy said, I have direct experience with the frontline roles of sales and service, inbound and also outbound. I'm looking at that from a virtual space, but also some of the more project roles. So I hope some of my experience today will be helpful. I'm going to talk a little bit about those transferable skills. So if you're in a role today, or indeed you've just lost a job, maybe it's temporary or it's longer term. We don't know in these days how long it's going to be. But maybe it's something you've been thinking about for a longer time as well, and this is the moment that you need to start to look at it more seriously. We'll talk a little bit about online interviews, because the whole process for remote is different, right? So from the time you apply for a job, how you do your interviews, how you are trained, everything is done remotely. So you might think, how would that work and how could it be successful? Um, Writing CV, I'm really only going to mention it because I know that Tracey has got another session lined up at another date from more of an expert in that field who's going to go through that with you, but I will just mention it as we go through it. And then just a little bit about your journey into remote. I guess at this stage everybody knows what remote working is, but people have been foisted, it's been foisted upon people at the moment where they didn't choose to do it, and I think that's a big thing. But the change is upon us. It's happening. The cultural change has been happening over the last number of years, and the drift towards remote. The demand has been coming from employees and also employers looking for it as well as a means of gathering new skill sets and being able to grow and scale their companies quite fast. So the simple explanation is it's an arrangement whereby you don't have to commute to a central place of work. You're doing everything from your home, and also transforming then. So typically we see in Ireland anyway, companies deciding to move to remote, so to transform their functions or part of their functions to remote. But there are, of course, companies who are fully remote, what we call fully distributed companies. And some of the names you'd probably be familiar with, I've just popped up there. So, Amazon and Apple have been around for a long time. Probably everybody knows somebody, a friend or a family member who's been working for them. But then you have HubSpot, which made a very recent announcement about remote jobs, which is super exciting, because to try and pull some of those larger multinationals out of the likes of Dublin, where they have hundreds of jobs, and to be able to spread them across the country is just incredible. And eBay has been recently advertising customer service type roles as well. Wayfair, where I used to work, again, customer service roles. And Shopify, again, looking at those sort of front end roles where you're managing accounts, managing shops, and so on for customers. So that's a sample of them. There are other ones as well. The three types of remote workers that we see, different types of, I suppose, remote employees where you're being employed directly by a company, you're getting all your full benefits, and certainly you're growing your career at that company. Freelancers or contractors who are, working for multiple different companies, and then people who are setting up their own businesses as well. You'll see a lot of different terms in the media about remote working. There's a variety of different arrangements as well. So whether it's from, flexible work, so telecommuting, where I work maybe 1 day a week from home or 2 days a week, mobile work where I'm on the move, e-work, the whole idea of the flexible workplace. And then what I talked about earlier on is the distributed workplace. And really, again, these are all similar names for what is remote working, whether it's full-time, it's part-time, or it's some hybrid thereof. And the term which we hope that you're going to be seeing a lot more of and that people are going to understand is the term location-less jobs. Sometimes we find that, companies aren't advertising them as location-less. Location-less for a company may mean that you can actually perform that role in our corporate office, or that you can actually perform that role at a location of your choice. So really trying to express them in terms of location-less, so that those offices aren't always having to be occupied, but that there are different choices there. And that'll come with time. So now you're going to work from home, and some of you may have had to do it very, very quickly. So, you're going to need a laptop or a PC, an iPad or a smartphone. You definitely have to have a webcam, because the big thing is about communications, that you can see each other. That's hugely important when you're communicating online. That you have a good headset, internet connectivity, that you've got a desk and a chair, communication tools, and I'll talk about those a little bit. But suffice to say that, all of us are on smartphones. Most of us are using messaging apps. We're using video. We're talking to our families, friends who may already be using it for work. So the whole concept of it is not alien to us at this stage. But there are tools that can be used to provide that for the overall company. When you're working at home, preferably you can have some privacy. Really difficult in these days, and we understand the challenges that people are going through at the moment, trying to juggle everything with their family, children, careers, everything at the moment. So it's very, very difficult. But obviously that's the preference, and some companies are absolutely going to demand that. Data protection is also going to be a consideration. And then training. So I'm thinking about training. So as you start to move into the world of remote, there may be some tools that you need to get up to speed with. Don't be afraid of them. Sometimes when we haven't used these tools, or the names of them are unusual, and it can be seen as a little bridge too far from where we are. Don't be afraid of them. I would say, just get to learn them. There's a huge amount of information that's available for free online, and of course there are training courses as well. So training when you are hired remotely is going to be done remotely, and then obviously that job is going to be performed remotely. So nice picture here of what your home setup might look like. So these are some examples. You see, we have one person there who's standing. Standing desks can be quite popular, particularly if you're there for a long time. Lots of companies are bringing these in now as well in their corporate offices. But you'll also find if you're working with some of these roles that you have two screens. That's not uncommon. And it might seem a little bit overwhelming if you haven't experienced that before, but you get used to it quite quickly. So that's an example of what a typical setup might be. Here's some examples of other pictures that aren't really the ideal, but I guess needs must in certain ways, particularly if people are waiting to set up their office. But these are just a couple of pictures that I thought would be useful just to look at. I don't think you can get the ironing done when you're working, but there you go. And the drinks cabinet is an interesting one as well. So the NUIG, so Nuala McGuinn from NUIG met with us when we were having our chapter launch here, and she put some information together for us about remote learning. And when I looked at it and we sat down and had a look at it and exchanged information about it, there are a lot of similarities. So one of the things about what are the skill sets that you need to work remotely, and we'll come and talk about specific skill sets. But the thing about specific skill sets is they can be taught. They can be taught. Technical skills can be taught if you have the will, the aptitude, and you put the time in. But the other type of skills that you probably have already, coming from the types of roles that you have, and I think that's something to look at as well. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail shortly as well. But the kind of skills that are very important when you are working remotely is written communication skills. Much of your work will be done either through email or through messaging tools or through different apps. So having good structured written communication is very important, and it's of a professional nature. When you're chatting with people internally, also I kind of describe it as a semi-professional. It's friendly, but it's not overly friendly, but it's professional as well. So getting that right style, because you really are trying to create that that communication and that reach out to somebody. Looking at problem solving. So when companies look to hire people who are going to work remotely, they are looking for the ability to solve problems. So whether that's solving problems that arise on a day-to-day basis in their home office or in their work, or whether it's problem solving for the job that's needed itself. And I'm sure when you look to your experience of what you've done, you'll have numerous examples of where you've been able to solve problems. So somebody who's going to be proactive and can be able to think that through. Alongside written communication is verbal communication. Again, sometimes people are daunted when they have the camera for the first time and they see each other, and they have to have those conversations. But you get used to it. After the first couple of minutes or the first one or two meetings, it just becomes the norm. So, but it's very, very important that you're able to articulate and express what you want to say very, very well. The other thing I would say is when it comes to meetings as well, is to make sure that you are documenting what you say. So when you have those meetings with your team or with somebody else online, that there's a short follow-up, whether it's on an email or it's a follow-up in a shared file. Companies are also looking for resourcefulness and creativity. So can the person think outside the box? So think about what you've done before, and were there examples where you had to come up with a solution, where you had to do something which was a little bit unusual, and what were the reasons that you did it? Was it because you went the extra mile for the customer? Was it because you did something else for somebody within your team? Or was it something that you did that was going to drive the business? So what was it? Critical thinking skills as well. So being able to break down the issues and to be able to, look at how you're going to be able to resolve those issues. So whether it's analytical skills or being able to think that through. I put down entrepreneurship, which is something that Nuala from NUIG was also looking at. But entrepreneurship is a term, but what it really means is about the ability to be able to resource and to be able to control what you're doing yourself, so that you're taking accountability for everything that you're doing, and you're running it like your own little business. You're working for another company for sure, but you're responsible for everything that you have. I used to say to folks when I was hiring them is that, when you come into the company, you really are your own brand. You are your own. You may be working for a company which has got a big brand name, but you yourself, Renate Kohlmann, I am my own brand, no matter who I'm working for or what I do. And it's having that entrepreneurial mindset that I think helps there. And that's a kind of a skill set that remote companies are looking for. So the ability to work in a team, which again is going to be slightly different when you're working online. The same concepts apply. So do you have good communications? Are you talking? Are you listening? Are you working on projects together? Are you able to help each other out, and how you do that? And there are ways that you can do that when you're working remotely as well as when you're in the office. In fact, I'm sure a lot of you know people who are working now from home, and I know just in my own family, 2 people who have told me that they're so much more productive when they're working at home. They're able to really focus on what those goals are, but still be able to have that time for the team bonding and the team working on joint projects, joint meetings, joint goals. And I'm sure some of you will have seen some of the fun stuff that people do, having lunch together, cocktail evenings together, and all that kind of stuff over the phone. Not exactly the same for sure, but people really are coming up with creative solutions of doing different things. Being able to make decisions, that's also key. Obviously, when you're starting off in a new job, you're going to be given the training and the wherewithal to be able to do the job properly. But being able to have those tools and resources and the confidence to make the decision so that you can move on with the job there and then is also important. Networking is something that I would say at this stage, at any stage in your career, is important, but also when you're starting off and you're thinking about remote working. So the fact that you've come to a session like this evening, the fact that you may or may not be part of the Grow Remote network, or there are many, many other networks there across rural Ireland and across the country and online, really join them, because the amount of information you can get, and when you throw out a question to somebody, that you get feedback as well, to be aware of what's happening out there and just to keep on top of trends and what's happening. And emotional intelligence, it really ties into the fact that you can really manage yourself, and you understand what the impact of your actions and what you do and say is on others, and you can see how that's also going to impact with customers, team, and with yourself. So that emotional intelligence is also something being looked at. So again, what you're going to need is a place to study or work. So you may decide that your journey to remote is that you need to do some study first. And there are online courses for working remotely or working virtually, which I have later on in the deck. But there are other types of courses and skill sets that you may also want, which are technical. They may be around some of the tools. Have you got access to a computer now? In a lot of cases, and in most cases, companies will give you the computer, so they'll ship that out to you with instructions of how to assemble it and so on. Very often they'll do a little video, a how-to video. They'll give you instructions. So again, having the ability to be able to read those instructions, understand those instructions, and also there's going to be help there as well. So that's why I say basic technical skills are important. Self-discipline is also very important. So that means things like, that you're getting up on time and that you're getting dressed to work, that you keep your routine, and that, particularly when you're in a role which is more of a project type role. If you're in a frontline inbound call, where it's inbound calls coming in and I need to handle each call, that call's coming in. So my work is presented to me. I still need to have the self-discipline as to how I'm going to handle those calls, write up all the notes, document the issues, solve the problems, do the follow-up and so on, and be ready. I need to have that. But more so if you're working where you don't have a lead as into the types of work that's coming in, you really need to have good self-discipline. And alongside with that goes good organization and administration skills. It's really vital that you've got a good way of organizing your work. I talked earlier on about communications and writing skills. And if you're writing, if you're a little bit, unsure and maybe grammar isn't your thing, there are tools that are there, right? So you can write things and you can always do a check. So you can do spell check, you can do grammar check, all that kind of stuff. And I really encourage you to do it because it shows your professionalism or lack thereof, and particularly when you're coming across in written communication. So yes, there's the fun stuff, the chit chat between ourselves, but when you're dealing with a customer facing situation, you could be writing something on it could be something that's going up on social media. You could obviously be writing something that's an email that's going out, or it depends on what you're doing internally as well. It just is important that you have professional skills. The other thing is that, not to be shy. So you definitely need to be willing to ask questions from other people, and to search out answers. You also need to be, I suppose, comfortable sharing with others in an open space. So that means, like, if we're having one-to-one meetings or we're having group meetings, that particularly when you're working remotely, those meetings, I suppose, a little bit like at work as well, where you might break out and have lunch or have team nights out or whatever, where you let your guard down a little bit and you open up a little bit, and you get to know a little bit about each other. That's really important, right? The same thing applies when you're working remotely. So you can share a little bit about yourself, because when you share a little bit about yourself, that's what creates the engagement. And so that's what's really important to bring people together. So you never have a them and us. You have, like, we're part of a team, and we all have different parts to play in it. Also, when it comes to sharing information in open space, there are tools as well on the work side, which we can talk about later as well. And again, being motivated and having that independence is also important. Again, time management is very important. Just thinking a little bit about the ground rules and getting those right. So for frontline services sales roles, where, as I described, the work is inbound, or it could be outbound, you're going to be working to targets, you're going to be working to metrics, it's going to be volume, cases resolved, sales made, customer satisfaction. But some of those roles are going to be looking for weekends, maybe split shifts. You have one day off between working 2 or 3 days, evenings, things like that. So you have to ask yourself, am I okay with that, right? Is that the kind of hours that I want to be working, or do I want a Monday to Friday, type of work? When you think about what the company is trying to solve for by having remote roles or by extending those roles, it's all about providing a great service to customers. And from a company point of view, it's about always on, right? So it's 24/7, or it's 8 to 8, it's 7 days a week. And in that world that we live in, that's really what companies in many cases are trying to solve for with remote roles, in addition to fully distributed companies, which are always going to be remote. And then again, think about training. So training is going to be online as well. So it's typically going to be self-directed, whereby you'll click on different documents or different webinars, and you'll go through that training yourself. And then there'll also be classroom style, a little bit like what we have now, only we can't see everybody on this right now. But think about when you're working remotely, because if you're coming from a role where you've been up and about on your feet the whole time, it's different. We're sitting down like we are now. That doesn't suit everybody. If it's a case that that's what you have to do, you need to make sure that you move as well, and that you get that balance, because that's something that people adjust to straight away. It's like, I'm always snacking, I'm getting a lot of food, my calorie intake is higher than I would like it to be, but I'm sitting down. So just think about that, right? So again, looking at the project type roles I talked earlier on, and problem solving skills, and the technical skills for your job. So how you can build rapport with customers, if that's the field that you're going to be working in or that you have worked in. So can you sell? Can you code? Have you got designer skills, finance, marketing, analytical skills? So what's all those other skills that you have, as well as, so your specific technical skills, as well as these other soft skills, which are really, really important. Very important to do your research about the company beforehand, and really ask yourself, is this right for you? It's difficult right now, because you may feel that you're being pushed into a certain way, because the options have become very narrow right now. We hope that it's going to open up, of course, but you just need to have a think about that. So somebody asked me, look, can we talk a little bit about roles where we know that unfortunately people have lost their jobs because of the current situation? And hospitality is something that we're very famous for in Ireland, and sadly there's a lot of those jobs have gone. Well, let's just talk about that for a second. So could I work in a remote role if I was working in hospitality? Okay, so what I'm thinking about if you've worked in hospitality is that, number one, you're going to be used to working different shift patterns. You're probably used to being called in at short notice, okay? So that's going to show your flexibility, your resilience, and your ability to be organized and get there on time. Also, it's going to show that you're impacting on the team. Hospitality, you're probably used to having dealt with difficult customer situations. You've had to deal with them in a professional manner, sometimes with discretion, and being able to resolve the issue for the customer. You've had to calm down situations on the spot while remaining professional all the time. You've been used to multitasking, and you're probably dealing with customers coming in, flights coming in. You could be dealing with trying to book things. You're waiting on the phone for someone else. You've got other people. Those are skills which, how you've been able to handle those is all built up in your experience. You're used to being on your feet. You've probably got good stamina and energy. You're used to working as a team and asking for help. You are good at listening. You're listening to, and you've probably learned very interesting stories from the people that you've come into contact with, So it gives you more information. It gives you more tools in your toolkit, how to respond to different situations. You probably also know how to stand up for yourself, right? So you may have had to say, well, no, it wasn't this, it's this. So that gives you resilience as well. And you may well have acquired specific knowledge, whether it's culinary, food, wine, maybe something about the decor, the design, DIY. These are all transferable skills. And as you go and look at different jobs, there are going to be different areas here that you can draw from. And then the other question is, what else? I would urge you that if you have been working in hospitality, that you make your own list. You take this, make your own list, bank down what your strengths are, even if you think they're small things and they're insignificant, because they can be the things that make the difference. So what about if you've been working in tourism? A lot of the similar things will apply. And when I was thinking about tourism, these kind of things came to mind. So you're probably able to communicate very well with people from diverse backgrounds, different cultures and languages. You may well be able to speak one or two other languages as well as English. You're probably going to be a very strong verbal communicator and could be a good judge of character. You may well be knowledgeable about history, architecture, music, be it local, Irish, or whatever you've been working in and where your tourism role has brought you into contact with. You're probably a good organizer, arranging itineraries and coordinating events. You may well have good negotiation skills. You've been working with hotels, resorts to work out rates, logistics, etc. You definitely have good customer handling skills, but along with that goes empathy. You no doubt have got good problem solving skills. So you've resolved issues like lost tickets, missing items, difficult situations. I missed my flight. Entrepreneurial skills, again, because it depends on where you're working in tourism. You may well be really trying to drive that locally as well and be thinking about things like designing posters, handling social media posts, and promoting the activities. What else? I'm sure any of you who have worked in tourism can come up with a much longer list than what I've just jotted down. And then what about if you've been working in retail? You've been working in the high street, in the shop. So we're definitely target driven. So you can sell, you know how to generate revenue, and more specifically, especially, is repeat revenue. So if you've had a great experience with the customer, you've been able to help them to buy what they want in the store, and you encourage them to come back. So you've been doing an amazing job doing that. If you can do that in the shop, why couldn't you do it online, right? So you're no doubt you're going to be good at creating excellent customer relationships and building rapport. I'm sure you've got many examples of when you went the extra mile for the customer to help them out, or maybe for a team member. You may well have had the opportunity to bring new initiatives into the team, initiatives for how we can improve sales or improve our customer service. You may well have had the opportunity to help newer members, coaching them and maybe even training them. You may well have documented checklists for staff if you had an idea. You may have been in the position where you stood in for the manager. You may be the manager, and you may have delegated those responsibilities, and therefore you've been creating careers for people within your team, but you may have been the person who stood in for the manager, and you may well have been given the responsibility for tasks like cashing up, locking up. You're definitely knowledgeable about your products and services. Think about them. Are any of those in niche areas? Like, for example, did you learn a lot about lighting? Did you learn, as I said, about cookware? Did you learn about furniture? Did you learn about clothing, brands? There's specific niche areas that you've probably learned, which are all transferable skills, and they may well be something that's important that could just help you to make that difference, stand out from somebody else. You probably know how to work as a team, and you may also have had to have dealt with conflict. Teammates not contributing. I'm the one who's doing it. This person didn't do it. How do I handle that? You may have had difficult issues to deal with, personal issues and issues within the team. And you may also have had experience of working with suppliers. You may also have experience working on the phone. What else? I'm sure you can come up with a whole lot of other ones that I haven't got there. So I chose just a couple of lines from a sample job description just to see how some of those would translate. So this one is actually from Amazon. So the couple of lines were, as a virtual customer service associate, you'll act as the first point of contact for our customers by answering their queries through phone, email, or chat. So any of those three previous roles that we've just talked about, you'd be well able to do this. First point of contact, you've been talking to customers, answering their questions, and being able to resolve their issues. Second one is you will support our customers with their orders, okay? Product inquiries, payment issues, account updates, website education, or problems they may be having. You can definitely see how your experience would translate to that. What you have to do is be able to draw out the examples so that when the interviewer asks you what your experiences are in these, that you have a couple of scenarios ready to go. If you're a people person and you can deliver great customer service, then this role is for you. Again, all of those roles, the basic tenet of them is people, managing people, working with people, and being able to deliver a product or service and also have fun, enjoy while you're doing it. You know, that's another tick in the box. And then it's important here to show that in Amazon, at least, they do 6 weeks of interactive online training. Not unusual for a company like that that's going to hire you virtually and train you virtually. And again, your training will be a blend of group and individual activities. So I hope that gives you some insight as to how your skills will transfer across. A little bit about the application process again. So it's different. You know, the days of handing in CVs and so on are gone a long time, but typically you'll be applying online. There'll be an initial screening. So you may respond to an application form. You may be asked to fill out many different fields, or you may be asked for your CV and your cover letter. Now, as I said, I'm not going to cover the CV here today, just very briefly to state that at the top of your CV, it's good to just give a little description about, you know, what your overall skill sets are. It's your bio in a sense. It's who I am. It's like what I could bring to the table. And then after that, obviously, you go through your work experience. But look, you'll get more feedback on that. The key is that you really focus on specific points that are going to demonstrate what your experience is and how it will be in tune with that job that you're applying for. And so if you're applying for 5 or 10 or 20 jobs, you need to have a corresponding number of CVs so that they're tailored specifically to that job. A lot of the core will be the same, but you may want to emphasize other points. So that's just one thing. And I think like a cover letter is also a good thing. Then you go through, if you get through that phase and you've gone through their screening, whatever they're looking for, typically there'll be a second screening, which could be a short video using any of these tools. So we're on Zoom here tonight. If you haven't used any of these tools before, just use them, get familiar with them. You know, phone a friend or a family or somebody, use them, Google Hangouts, Skype, Zoom, and become comfortable behind the camera having these conversations and practice. Or you may be asked to upload video clips. So they may ask you a certain number of questions and you're talking into the video, and then the recruiter will review those in their own time, and they'll typically go through them for different points that they want to focus in on. Okay, that may be it, or you may have an online assessment following that, and then you may have a final interview, or there could be another one in between. Look, it's going to be a little bit different for all companies, but that's kind of the process. And so the thing to be clear about is that you've got a really smart CV, that your application is really focusing on those main areas that they're looking for, that you're comfortable, that you have got your examples ready, that you're do you know what, it's a good opportunity for you to talk about what your experience is. But you do need to be smart, and you do need to focus it in on the main areas of the job. So the interview, just a couple of minutes, is typically a behavioral interview, and what that's about is really to get to know you as a person and to understand how you're going to respond to situations. So we're not going to be in the same office, so it's really critically important that I, as an employer, or whoever the employer is, can really see that you're reliable, that you're trustworthy, and that you've demonstrated responsibility. That's very, very important. And one of the things I would say is that typically, not always of course, but when people have gone into a remote role and they've enjoyed it and they've excelled and so on, they're typically going to go on to another remote role. So if someone has experience of that, working remotely, that's obviously going to be a plus for them. But the other thing I would say is that if you haven't, get yourself signed up to an online training course and start to do some remote learning. Because again, like I described in the earlier slide that we put together with NUIG, some of those basic attributes are the same. And again, if you haven't been able to demonstrate that you have worked remotely before, at least you can show that you have been involved in a remote environment, in a training environment. And again, your attitude to learning and your willingness to learn are really important. Just one or two slides about the interview, and I'm sure most of you have heard about the STAR method, the STAR method, when you're answering questions. So typically this is where the interviewer really wants to get to understand a little bit more about you. And so they'll ask open-ended questions, and the questions will be like, tell me about a time when. And basically what you need to do is to sort of provide them the situation of what happened. So it might be, you know, we had to open up the shop, for example, or we were launching a new product or whatever. So, what was the event? The event was a product launch, and what was the challenge that you faced? So you can talk about the challenge. Maybe there was a delay in the products arriving, or whatever that happened to be. So, what was your task in that specific situation? Well, I was tasked with handling all the suppliers and bringing them into their seats, and talking about the product and so on. What were my assignments? What were my assignments? Not what my team assignments were, but what my responsibility was. And then what action did I take? What steps or procedures did I take to relieve or to rectify the situation? I may not have been able to fully resolve the situation, but what's your thought process? What did you do? Did you freeze? Did you ask for help? Did your plan B kick in? What did you do? And then at the end of the day, what was the result? So tell me about what was the outcome of all the actions that you took. And so there's a couple of examples, the kind of open-ended questions that you'll be asked, like, tell me about a time when you worked well or you performed well under pressure. Tell me about a time when you had conflict at work. So you have to think these through, and you can come up with your own scenarios, and don't make it up. I remember talking to somebody once, and they said, well, what does the interviewer want to hear? Don't make it up. I kind of describe that as kind of like a Teflon interview, squeaky clean. It doesn't need to be squeaky clean. It needs to be real. So, whether it worked out in the positive sense or in the negative sense, the whole point is how you handle the situation. And, whether it was successful or if it wasn't, what did you learn from it? So it's really, really important. Questions like, can you give me an example of? Have you ever, or describe a time when you had to do X, Y, and Z, or things like that. They're the kind of questions, and you 100% can prepare for them. The other type of interview that you see with companies, online companies as well, is an interview which is more like a life story. And when you boil down to it, and I've actually highlighted some of the points here, so you can see that the end result is the same. It's another method of finding out from the employer what you've done in the past, whether it's in your personal life or your career, how they've all brought you to the point where you are today. So today you're sitting here in front of an interview looking for a job with their company. So what it does, it reflects on that, and it'll draw out those scenarios through your life story. So again, the interviewer is looking for the challenges. So how you can demonstrate that you've overcome those challenges, looking at specific moments in time. And again, same things I discussed earlier on. So how did you impact things and the people around you? Were you aware of your own strengths and how they would impact others? Can you communicate authentically? So are you real, or are you just telling me what I want to hear? Because they'll see through that. We all have different life experiences. They're all different. And that's what makes us who we are. And the thing is, can you bring what you have that's going to be able to add value into the company that you would like to work with? Do you have a history of building trust with others? Critically important in all jobs, but more so when you are working remotely as well. Are you ready for the job? Do you have the skills? So do you have the specific technical skills for the job that you're applying for? But again, I'd say are there other skills there, some of the softer skills that we've looked at. And do you have a high degree of care for what you do in work and life? And to me, that's another way about saying, like, are you passionate about what you do? Are you paying attention to detail? The small stuff does count. So it's a different type of an interview style. And again, along with those, you may be asked to do different projects. You might be asked to do like a real life scenario, different things like that. Because if you think about it, The amount of time that an employer spends hiring is critical, that you get the right person for the job. But typically that process is even more important, you can say, if you don't actually get to meet that person and you are relying on, the virtual communication and so on and so forth. So it's really, really important to build that rapport, to create that connection and to get that early on. So when you do go for the interview, make sure that you have a clear space in your home, wherever you are, with no distractions on that day. There shouldn't be any distractions on that particular day. Test your technology in advance. You may think it worked yesterday. Test it in advance. Test your video, test your microphone, test your headset. Make sure you've got the right time. Sometimes at different time zones, like is it an hour ahead, is it an hour behind us? Make sure you have the right time. You can be easily caught out on something like that. Be well prepared in advance and practice. You may be at home, but make sure that you dress for your interview. So, dress well in a professional way. Be yourself, but always be professional, and make that connection with your interviewer. Remember, you may be the 10th person that they've interviewed today. So there could be something that you connect with. So when you use the camera, make sure that you look at the interviewer as well, not be looking off the side or something like that. You need to make that connection. And again, it might be a little bit uncomfortable at the start, but you will get used to it. So I've put a whole list of different locations here to look for jobs. The ones on the right at the bottom are Irish based. And the one on the top left is the Grow Remote job board. So if you go onto the Grow Remote website, you will find the Remote Jobs Ireland, or you can just go straight in. And Abodu then on the bottom right again is another Irish-based company whereby what they do, it's a platform that you upload your CV and the employer uploads their jobs and they do a match. There's a fee both ways, and they do a match and so on. And then flex jobs, again, like people looking for part-time jobs and so on. The thing about finding jobs is it's a challenge because not all jobs are advertised as remote or location-less. And sometimes what we find is even when you apply for a job, if it's the right candidate and you talk to the employer about making that remote, very often that is the case. Employers still are getting out there, they're dipping their toes in it. And today, obviously, it's like, the whole world is working remotely. But, how long is that going to last for? Are people going to want to rush back to the office? And are they set up for success in it as well? So some of the things that, we kind of worry about a little bit is maybe that experience of working remotely during these times of heightened emergency times, critical times, may not be quite well set up for success. And so the experience may not be that which you would like it to be. So again, if you get to that point and you find that you're not quite there, you need training, then there's some examples here of where you can get training. So this type of training is specifically for remote. And when we say remote, what does that mean? Well, it talks to you about the tools, and it'll talk to you about those other skills that we looked at, some of the soft skills, talk to you about your time management, talk to you about problem solving, different tools like that, which would be helpful. We don't really have a huge amount of training courses for people moving into the remote world, but these are some of them that are available. So I would urge you to take a look at them. And also there's another one there from the Irish Institute of Training and Development as well. So one of them was passed. I was looking at this last week. There's one there tomorrow, setting remote working up for success, people the second, the third, and virtual classroom essentials program as well. So you can go on there and you can find out a bit more about those. And there's also the ETB, which you can find out about as well. I didn't put the link to it here, but the ETB, if you look to etb.ie, is another resource. Just very briefly, you will have heard about the different tools. So there are many different tools. I just put a couple of the logos there: Microsoft Teams, Slack. So these typically are messaging tools or tools that have got different channels that you can collaborate on, you can work together with your team on. Then you also have tools like what we're using now for hosting meetings: Zoom, Google Hangouts, etc., Skype, and so on. So also different tools for collaboration and for interacting with your customers. There's a document here that a colleague of mine, we're in the local Pulse Club here in Ballinasloe, We did something last week, so he put this together, and it's a very useful tool, and we've included it in the pack as well. And the links are all clickable, so you can see. You can also see what's free. So a lot of these tools are free, and what their main benefits are. So that sounds like an awful lot. And if you're working for a company, they'll have one or two of these, right? So you don't need to worry. But you may have an interest, and I would urge you that, if you are in between working for a remote job, is check these out and have a look at them, because if you're comfortable with them, and if you have the knowledge about them, and you are doing an interview with an employer, the fact that you can say that you can use these tools is also going to be a plus. Okay, so finally, your journey to remote, just thinking about it, is first of all, check the skills that are required and compare to your experience. Now, don't say, there's all 10 of these skills here, and I only have 5 of them, or I only have 8 of them, and I'm not going to apply. I think we all know that that's not really the way to do it. You take a look at what those gaps are, and you may well be able to overcompensate, because companies are trying to get the best fit, and it's very rare that they're going to tick all the boxes in what their requirements are. And also, companies will train, and they will like to train as well. So don't be put off if you think that you've got the majority of what's required. But I suppose, get your list together and make sure that you draft out your own notes on what your skills are and what your specific examples are, because when you do that, that gives you the confidence to be able to talk with what you can do, and focusing on what you can do, not necessarily what you can't do. Yes, there are gaps, and that may need training. So draft your scenarios that back up the skill or your experience. If you do need training, well then, no problem, go and get the training, okay? A lot of training is free, and there may be some grants for training as well, but there's a huge amount of training that's available also for free. And it's also going to be something good to invest in if you can't find the one that you want that is free. Companies will have different requirements for internet speed and so on. So do you have internet, and do you have workspace? Again, practice. Practice doing mock interviews if you're new to them, and video recording. So get somebody to do that with you online. A little bit about the CV. Again, did you write it for the role? Are you prepared? And you know what will you do if you're not successful? Okay, so we'd like to think that you'll take the learnings and you'll try again. And if all of that fails, you go through it again, and then you get your hopefully your first successful role remotely. And as I said earlier, typically we find that people who have their first remote role will go on to take a remote job again after that. And from an employer point of view, it's a much faster ramp up, because the individual that they're hiring already has an inherent skill set that they've learned. So looking at some feedback from employers when asked about, well, what are you looking for when you're hiring? And this is across the board. This is job agnostic. So this is just a couple of sound bites. So I just think they're useful. So they're looking for somebody who's got comfort around the technology, has got a good work ethic, self-motivated, somebody who can work independently, strong communication skills, critical thinking, demonstrated responsibility, and someone who values continuous learning, because it's all about continuous learning. You're never going to know everything. And in the world that we operate, technology is changing, tools are changing, everything is updating. So continuous learning. And again, is that person going to be a good cultural fit? So learn a little bit about that company. If you know somebody who's worked there, ask them about what it's like to work there. They're looking for people who are proactive, someone who's receptive to feedback as well. And sometimes people can be uncomfortable with that. It's like holding a mirror up. But someone who's receptive to feedback, and that means takes it on board and will act on the feedback. The ability to separate your personal life from work life. It's not always easy, but it's something to work at. Someone who's the ability to overcome tough challenges, has perseverance, and a few other things here, professionalism and punctual as well. And again, so the last little tips, again, from employers that we heard last week from employers, that if you have an online presence, that can help. If you have a blog or a video, it can help, because the company can see what you're like, how you think, how you communicate. And again, communication is really important for remote teams, because we spend so much time communicating in remote roles. And again, it definitely does help if somebody has that experience. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to share with you today. Sorry, Tracy, I think I went a little bit over, but I hope that's been helpful.
That's been so helpful. You went a little bit over, but it was all just fantastic. I think pulling out the words of the job specs is really good. Guys, we just posted a link into Zoom. It's another Zoom room, but it's not like a webinar like this. It's where we can get to know each other. Just a point to note that Yvonne Foy is here from the Leash Offaly ETB. They are offering a free course, upskilling in the skill of remote work. It's with a certification called Workplaceless. Anyway, it's all tried and tested, and they'll be offering it soon. So Yvonne hopefully will be with us in the next Zoom room, and you can ask her some questions. But she's kindly put her email there in the chat, which I will circulate afterwards. And you can email her to ask her any questions you have about getting upskilled in this area. So this is the first time I want to give this meeting room thing a go. So please do join us. And hopefully it will work. I need to hop out of this to get into the next one. Renate, thank you as ever. You're just a superb person to have on these. It's just make everything very clear. So thank you very much.
Happy to help. Thanks, Tracy.
Okay. See you in the next room.